Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm really excited to have Jacquelynn Buck on the show today. She has done a lot of boudoir photography as well as portraits in several niches. She has a very unique perspective on the market and on marketing because she is in a military family that has to relocate several times throughout her career and start her brand awareness from zero. Really awesome lessons to learn from this perspective of marketing. I talked to a lot of people about how hard it is to get started, but we're going to come away in today's episode with some really tactical tips you can use in your own business to really get word of mouth moving more, and if you are afraid about relocating your business, some tactics you can use to make that transition smoother. Jacquelynn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. You're also to kind of give you some more background. You've done a master's class at WPPI a couple years in a row now, haven't you?
That's right. Yeah. It started about 5 years ago when I was published in Rangefinder on boudoir photography, and then sort of springboarded from that into a master's class. And I've been teaching a master's class every year.
Good for you.
Since then. So yeah, it's been awesome.
So boudoir has just kind of exploded in the market.
It has.
Really, really big.
Yes, and that's part of, I think, the impetus is it's really something that people are getting into, and still even getting into more than ever before. And so it's nice to have, especially the master's class, which is a smaller format and a longer period of time, to learn some of the ways to actually incorporate boudoir into people's businesses or start a boudoir business just all together.
Perfect. Really good stuff. We can talk more about that at the end of the call for people who want to learn more. So let's go back to the beginning of deciding you wanted to be a photographer and in making the leap into making it a business.
Sure. I think like most people got into photography sideways. I say most people because I feel like everyone I talk to, that's how it happens.
Right on.
I actually have a master's in public health and worked in the public health field for about 5 years full time, and decided that I wanted to do photography just as a hobby. It was nothing that I had thought about doing as a business. And I got into it from a nature landscape perspective, actually. Started photographing and going up to workshops and things and learning about nature, and then started selling and competing and winning. And then all of a sudden people ask you to do family portraits because they think you're a photographer, you must do families. So I thought, well, I don't know. People move. They don't listen. I want to do things that stay still. But I decided to try it out and really kind of just got hooked. It was one of those things where I didn't expect it. I wasn't looking for it. And all of a sudden, it was the only thing I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah.
So I spent several years kind of transitioning from the public health into the photography, doing it methodically, saving money and using the money from my full-time job to fund the part-time job. And then eventually was able to just stop doing the public health about.
That's awesome. This is so fun. So I recorded a couple podcasts this week, and I was talking with Anna Brandt, who had I found that there's nobody in the middle, where there's some people that like rip the Band-Aid off, have no plan, have no like preparation. They just go, oh, I'm gonna go do this. I'm gonna quit the day job. Here I go. And then there's others who are a little bit more responsible. And it sounds like you are one of those. So I'm glad we get to talk about different approaches. There's no right or wrong.
Right.
But this is really cool. So talk about why you took the approach you took, and the benefits of going gradually, and how you were able to use the flexibility of photography to get into it that way.
Sure. And I think that for a lot of people, fear is a huge demotivator when it comes to pursuing anything like photography or any dream, really.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to not be afraid of the process. I knew that failure was a potential, and I think failure kind of motivates me to succeed even more because I don't want to fail. It's sort of a personal, I'm not gonna fail at this. So
totally, it's good to know what motivates you. Totally.
Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. I'm sort of a competitive person, so I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna make this happen.
Right on.
And so the way to do it for me was gradually. I knew that if I just jumped in and didn't think about the process ahead, that it just wasn't going to work the way I wanted it to work. So it wasn't like I had a 5-year plan that I wrote out, but I knew when I was ready to move to the next step. I knew when I was more interested in the photography than anything else that I needed to do something to learn about photography to make sure it was what I wanted to do. So I started
to get it to a point to where it was generating some revenue before stopping the other revenue stream. Yeah.
Revenue was huge. But also education. I didn't want to be that person that just said, hey, I'm a photographer, I'm going to photograph your wedding, with no experience and no education and no training.
Responsibility. Good for you.
Yeah. So
that's awesome. So let's jump ahead to when did you know it was right? This is another thing I love picking people's brains about, is when was the right timing? Like, was it when you thought you were going to quit the day job, or how did that whole plan out when you're like, okay, it's time to make the leap to going full-time photography?
Truthfully, for me, it was just a happy accident. It was a transition from one state to another. We moved from Ohio to Georgia, and the grant that I was working on in the public health sector ran out. It was a 5-year grant. 5 years was over. And so I thought, you know what? This is it. This is the time. I'm going to leave. I'm not going to look for another job, and we're moving to a new location, and I'm going to start. I'm going to be a photographer, period.
Wow. So you actually get to tell both parts of that story. So on one hand, you did kind of go tread lightly and like learn and prepare yourself. But in another sense, you were starting from zero in a new city full time.
That's right.
Just kind of out of necessity and happy accident. Good for you.
Yes. And I will tell you, the most challenging part of that was convincing my husband that it was possible, because he was scared, as scared as I was about the idea of income. And I said, no, this isn't a hobby anymore. This is we had to have a come to Jesus. We had to be like, no, this is really what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So
give me I want to get, like, so you can just speak in percentages, but like, so before, how big had you grown your portrait business? Like, what percentage of your day job income had you grown it up to before having to move?
I was definitely in a 60-40 position. I was doing about 60% photography, 40% everything else in terms of timing, in terms of all the time I spent. And in terms of income, it's hard to say because of, obviously
totally.
Monetarily.
So it's like 50-50-ish. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
But it was definitely enough where I knew I could. I knew it was lucrative enough.
Yes.
It wasn't like I was jumping into this situation.
You had a roadmap where it's like, as long as I do, there might be some differences from state to state, but in general, as long as I follow these steps and use this workflow, I can get the right return I need out of my time invested.
That's right.
Sweet. Awesome. Okay. So let's keep skipping ahead. So now let's talk about how many times have you had to move to new cities since being a portrait? Yeah,
this move to Tucson was the third time. So I consider
3 times. You started from zero.
Yes.
Wow. What are some of the harder lessons that were like, this third time? Are you feeling like, am I crazy? This is
Yeah, it's definitely what is wrong with me. The one major thing that I've realized is geography makes a huge difference in marketing strategies and what works and what doesn't. What works in a small town in Georgia, where we moved from, is not working in Tucson, Arizona, which is a much bigger city. Yep. And I actually anticipated the difference incorrectly. I thought moving to Tucson, a bigger market, a bigger city, I would have more flexibility to raise my prices and really kind of put myself into a market that was more supportive of that.
Right.
But as it turns out, in some areas that's true, and in some areas, it's particularly weddings, it's not true. The wedding industry is way different here than it was in small town Georgia.
Yeah. There's just more fish in the sea for both photographers and customers. Yeah.
Yes. And Tucson is a resort destination kind of area, so there are a lot more resort weddings going on, which makes a big difference. In Georgia, it was much more of a DIY venue, driven, not venue driven, but, just
people taking their own events. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so in these 3 times, what are some of the key, what advice would you give somebody who's considering, I think it'll fit well for somebody who's just starting out for the first time, or somebody who is actually having to go through a transition? What advice do you have to share? I
definitely highly recommend jumping ahead of your start time. So you don't quit your job and then market your photography. You market before you get to the point where you're ready to start working.
Yeah.
So in every place I've moved, I've marketed at least 3 months ahead of the move.
Smart.
And by marketing, I mean Google ads. I start changing all of my wording, my hashtags, my location tags, everything. I start telling people I am a X photographer in X city, even though I'm still living in the previous city. And I think putting all of that, it's really internet driven, to be honest. And then I start calling people who could be potential connections. I have no fear of cold calling a wedding coordinator and saying, hey, I'm moving to Tucson. I'd love to meet you for coffee. and really starting networking ahead to know, even phone calls. It doesn't have to be a one-on-one meeting. How can I meet with you and how can we work together? I'm moving. And if you give them that, hey, I'm new to town story, which is true for me, it's a little bit more of an in. Hey, I don't know anybody. What can you help me? Can you tell me what I'm coming into? What's the industry like here?
Good for you. Just willing to put your neck out there. That's fantastic. I'm always curious. So I talk a lot about partnering with other vendors, partnering with wedding planners and stuff like that. Have you ever been totally shot down? I just kind of, what happens when people are just like so not interested?
Yeah, I have been shot down, and rejection in general, I think just you have to have a thick skin in this industry in any case, clients rejecting you, all sorts of things. I really just move on. I mean, if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. And sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. And you just have to keep trying. I think that's it, especially in a bigger city, there's a lot of people. Now, in a smaller town, you could be working with 2 people and that's it. There are only 2 coordinators. And then if you can't connect to one or the other of them, then you have to maybe move on to a different strategy. There's a benefit there. So one question I've got for you. So you've been totally upfront that you're not even there yet, that you're new to the city. When you're partnering with other businesses, like what's in it for them is that you might someday also refer business to them that way. But don't you think they're just going to come like, well, she's brand new, she has no existing network. Have you ran into issues with that, or is it the reverse? Yes. No, actually, I think that what the key there is to find somebody who's relatively new to the industry as well. So I ended up partnering well with a coordinator who was just getting started.
How do you find out? How do you know? You just get lucky and find out they're new?
Yeah.
Perfect.
It was really just luck. It's kind of a cold call situation, and the one that bites is the one who's like, hey, yeah, I'm just starting too, and I would love to partner with you because I need the same kind of help or whatever. And her, she had the value of having lived in Tucson and knew the industry, but I had the value of helping her with the things that maybe she didn't already know about.
She was new to the industry herself. Oh, that's fantastic. That's so great. I think that's just a good example where you don't know until you stick your neck out there and just take that risk. You never
and what
know.
If you lost a cup of coffee or a lunch with somebody that could even just be a friend down the line?
Yeah.
I mean, it's never a loss.
Instead of being so attached to like what's the instant return, you really have to come at it with it like looking for how can I help you? How can we build a relationship? That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you also talk about in your marketing how important it is that you create an experience. So talk about how that dovetails into charging the prices that you want to charge as well as attracting the clients you want to attract.
Sure. One of the things that I learned really in all of the years and all of the moves is that the clients that remember you are the clients that are willing to spend the money with you. And I think making yourself memorable it's several different things for me. It's not the same for everybody, but truly the way that I do it is I remember that 80% of my clients are 20% of my clients are 80% of my business.
Totally.
And so I take care of those 20%. I know who they are by how they talk about my work, how they talk about the experience they had with me, how they talk about, the things that I deliver to them, the products that they're getting from me. So I know them by those signs. And so I take care of them. I give them gifts and I give them exclusive, not discounts per se, but like, hey, I'm having this special, it's exclusive only for clients who've used me in the past.
Right.
Or things like that really kind of take care of them or help them feel taken care of.
Yeah.
And I think that works really well in the wedding industry for sure, but certainly well in any kind of portrait world as well. I know who my good clients are and I want to take care of them and they become friends. So it's easy. It's not like I'm trying to seduce them into, doing something they don't want to do.
Right,
it truly is a relationship at that point. And so it's just, you just know who they are.
So when you define a good client, so it's one of the metrics are they've spent a lot of money on product with you, and others is they've referred a number like business to your way. That's what else do you qualify them as a good client you invest in?
Right. Well, the funny thing is the number one thing that I feel is the best indicator is that they really do love the product that I've given them. They love their photos and they talk about them in ways where they can't imagine ever hiring another photographer.
Sweet.
So it's not even so much always about how much they've spent or how much they've referred me. I think those are byproducts of the fact that they are just enamored with what has happened, how I've made them feel, how I've made them look, how I've taken their crazy 2 children who are screaming and crying through half the session and given them an image where the children are perfect.
Right.
And it's not magic. It's just, I mean, I've had so many people say, I thought this session was totally terrible and my kids were crying and I was crying when I was leaving. And then there's this beautiful photo and I can't, I mean, so those are the people that I know that will be clients for life.
Yeah.
Because I've taken chaos and made it extraordinary.
Yeah,
and
right.
that's kind of what you do as a photographer, I think.
That's cool. I like that approach. So knowing that you're not going to hit it out of the park for every single customer,
right,
but really listening for the times that you do and taking extra special care. I think that there's a really good book in personal development that's popular in like the corporate space called Go to Your Strengths.
Oh.
That's written by an author, Marcus Buckingham, where he's got this survey they started years ago where they say, if your child comes home from school and they have, let's say they have 3 B's and a D, where do you give the energy? Where do you focus most of your attention on? And a lot of parents will say, well, we've got to focus it on the D. We've got to get well-rounded. We got to pick up where their weaknesses are, right? But his argument is that instead, we should focus more energy on the areas that our children are thriving and letting them do more of what they're doing well, because we all as humans compensate better for with our strengths. Same thing, I think this applies so well to a marketing piece, is it's so much, you're going to be filled with way more energy and enthusiasm when the more you're interacting with the clients that love you, that already have an awesome experience. So go there more, go reach out, and it's easier to do because it's more authentic. You're excited to work with them. You're excited to give them bonuses. And then the return you get on doing a bonus or a gift or something like that for your top 20% of your clients, that return is going to be spread and be way more effective also. That's really good.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's see, what else? What are some other strategies you use what are some of the ways you like to reward your best clients? What are some fun things you like to do?
Sure. One strategy that I definitely want to highlight is, and this is sort of thinking outside the box from a networking perspective, there are professional networking organizations in the country that photographers don't often think about joining.
Yeah.
It seems outside of the realm. And I will tell you, I have had great success. And if you have the patience, because you have to understand, just like with any networking opportunity, the payoff is not immediate.
Yep.
So I really focus on networking from not just me networking with other photographers or other people in my industry, but people outside of my industry, people who are my clients or know my clients.
Totally.
And so that's a huge thing for me. I spend a lot of time networking.
So something like a BNI group or something
that's right.
like that.
I'm in a BNI group. So
Sweet.
that is one of the things. But it
That's
doesn't
great.
always work.
I've got a good question for you. So I think you're spot on. I agree with you. I speak a lot about how you've got to invest, like working on your business instead of in your business every day. And the more you can spend time on projects that'll give you limitless return, like a relationship or a friendship, can just keep giving you return and benefit over time. Whereas an hour spent doing a flash sale or editing you don't ever get that time back. You get the return one time on that one thing, right? So it's finding ways to invest your time that give you ongoing return.
Yes.
It's fun to speak about, but what I'm curious is because you've had to do this so many times over again, what are some of the early indicators that are a good sign that it's worth sticking with a networking group or worth some of these other marketing tactics that you don't necessarily get a return on right away? What are some other indicators to look for? Do you just trust that I'm just gonna stick with this and see what happens?
I think that it's difficult to trust when you don't see the immediate return. And I think it's just, for me, it's the experience of knowing that networking works that keeps me there even when I'm not maybe getting the feedback I want.
Right.
But it's also about changing your tactic too. I think that if you start talking with the people, my networking group is huge. There's 45 of us or something like that. Yeah. And so there are so many different places that I can go and people I can talk to in that group who, if I'm having something where I'm like, hey, I'm not getting the return that I need right now, I can ask somebody who's been in that group for 5 years and say, what am I doing wrong? What could I do better? And I guarantee you it's not because I don't do good work. It's because I'm not putting the right message out there.
Yeah.
I'm not tapping into what they're looking for enough that they're there. So it's just, you can't just keep doing the same thing and expecting the same result. If the result that you're getting is not what you want, or you're not getting any result, you need to find out what's wrong with how you're doing it. And
so two pieces. One I hear is, you just have to trust that you've learned over time that networking groups pay off.
Right.
You don't see the return immediately. A lot of times the return comes kind of as a surprise in ways you never would have thought it would come.
Right.
So you trust in the process, number one.
That's right.
So let's put a number on it for people who've never joined a group. Like, what's a realistic expectation in your experience when you've joined a new group? How long before you get your first referral? Does it range?
Well, I can tell you that the one here, I had my first referral within a week. So I think that's partially, but I will tell you that you have an option in a B&I group to join for 1 year or 2 years.
Yep.
I jumped in on the 2 years and I said, this is it. I know I'm going to be in this for 2 years. And so if I hadn't gotten in the first week, I knew I was committed. I wasn't going anywhere.
Yep.
But I think that other groups, it takes building the relationship first. And I would say, give it 3 months. If after 3 months you're not getting a return, then maybe you're doing something incorrectly, or you're not.
There's a combination. So there's 3 key points. A, it's jumping in. B, jumping in, trusting the process, trusting that networking is valuable, and then listening for cues and asking for feedback is, I think, really good advice. And just being authentic about it. And I think the underlying piece here is that you went into it committed to the long haul, right? Think about how by committing for 2 years up front, how you just approached the whole process a little bit more authentically, where you weren't looking immediately for that instant gratification or that instant return, but you were committed to building long-term valuable relationships. And I think that has a huge impact on how quickly networking can work also.
Right.
Awesome. This is really, really helpful. So what are some other cool things you do? Back to making your clients feel really special, what are some other things you do for them?
I absolutely try to thank them for things in milestone moments. So if I'm with a wedding client, if I book that client, I will send them a thank you gift. And it can be anything. In my case, I have a specific item that I send them it's just like it's cookies. So that's my thank you, but it can be anything within a certain value that fits into your, marketing money budget. But I also make sure that I have touch points with my clients. So if I'm not hearing from them, this is particularly to weddings because you're with them for so long.
Right.
If I'm not hearing from them, I'm touching base with them. I'm saying, hey, do you want to go out for coffee? Or, hey, let's sit down and talk about your calendar. Hey, do you want to come over? And I think that's part of why engagement sessions are important for me, because those are touch points to get to know them better and to have moments with them. And when they come to my home studio to see their portraits for the first time, I try to make it a very welcoming environment. I sometimes will bake brownies. Sometimes I will have some beverage to offer them. So I think that those are things that make it a more welcoming environment and more of the person I am coming through. Totally. So that's one of the ways I take care. At holidays, I give holiday gifts to the clients who've spent over a certain threshold, and those gifts are usually little ornaments with my favorite photo from their session.
Yep.
And again, it's all within a certain dollar value. I'm not spending huge amounts of money because I want it to make sense, but I want it to be memorable.
Yep.
But then in terms of incentives within the purchasing, when people are here to buy their photos for the first time, they're going through the review process, there will be incentives for them to purchase more, or they will perhaps, consider spending more if I have collections put together in a more sensible manner.
Right.
But one of the things, and to mention sticky albums, that's one of the ways that I incentivize, if that's the word, clients. It's sort of, if you spend over a certain threshold, here are some cool things you might get. Or I also, for high school seniors, use it as an incentive to book. Like, hey, I'm this cool high school senior photographer, and I've got this really neat app that is going to have all your favorite photos on your phone.
Awesome.
And isn't that a cool reason to book me instead of the other guy? So I use it 2 ways. I use it, and sometimes I use it as a surprise thank you. If someone has purchased X amount of dollars in my head, or maybe they're just an amazing person, client, whatever, I will say, hey, I have this really special gift I'd like to give you. And that'll be after the fact. They don't know it's coming. And then when they get it, they're like, oh, wow, that's really. So I think that in any way, you can use any kind of gift in those same 3 ways, you know,
right on.
To give them, to give you memory in their minds.
Yep.
Or you to be
that's really cool. Like using the things that they're drawn to, something that you know they care about, you can use it as an incentive to pull people in to booking or spending more, spending in a package, as well as surprising them with a benefit, with a perk. I think that I've said it probably 100 times on the podcast that Seth Godin defines word of mouth marketing as surprise and delight. And what people don't do is when their expectations are met, we don't go telling everybody about it anymore, right? We only brag about something when our expectations are exceeded. Absolutely. Something unique happens and we're delighted by it. And of course, to the negative, if our expectations are not met, and people talk about that too. So it's really important to be planting these seeds. You talked also about the importance of multiple touch points. Mm-hmm. I think that we're all so busy, but there's just so much going on that whether it's on the front end, on the marketing side, there's all these silly stats where people like to say how many times somebody has to see your brand before they reach out. That number just keeps going higher. Right. And then throughout the process of working with you, the more authentic milestone touch points, where if it's just an email or a phone call or a card or something, each one of those touch points by themselves isn't gold, but it's the total sum, so that they feel like they're a part of you. And then where it gets really powerful is when they bump into a friend who's looking for a photographer, and it's just natural that you are the first person they think of.
Definitely.
Jacquelynn, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This is just really good stuff. I thank you for the high-level conversation. And also, I wanted to make sure to thank you. I think for as much as I think we owe our service members in the military and however they contribute, a lot of times people forget the other costs, the other people sacrificing, and moving your business across the country several times is an incredible amount of work and sacrifice. So I sincerely appreciate everything you do and your family does to support our country. So thank you. Next, how can people go to learn more about you? I know you're speaking again this year at WPPI. We'll add links. Tell me a little bit about the class you're doing this year.
The master's class is essentially a boudoir for beginners type class. Yep. I'm really big into posing and lighting women of all shapes, sizes, your non-typical boudoir client. So it's really about shaping with shadows and light and working towards making any woman your client, as opposed to the ones that we traditionally think of as boudoir clients. Nice. So it's going to be a start to finish how I do a boudoir session with an emphasis on every woman is boudoir beautiful. Fantastic. What a great message. Very cool. We'll include links to how to learn more. Again, thank you so much. It was great to have you on the show. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it so much. Cheers.